Welcome to WEBTOON CANVAS Workshop, and we're here to introduce ourselves and talk a little bit about our projects, but most importantly, we're going to talk about how to make money on WEBTOON Canvas. So let's introduce ourselves first. So Phil, who are you?
How to make money. Oh, sorry about the reverb. Hey guys, I'm Phil Falco. I'm the co-creator of Slice of Life on WEBTOON, also creator of Haunting and co-editor on By Visibility. I've been working with Kat for about a year or two now. I actually don't know how long I've been working with you.
I think it's been about around 2 years or so, which is kind of crazy to think.
We're creeping up on our 2-year anniversary. And yeah, we're both, as you will learn, very involved in. We have our hands in a lot of different pots with comics between Kickstarter, Patreon, WEBTOON, of course, Tapas, and we're really excited to talk about all of them.
Yeah. So I'm Kat. So I work with Phil, and we do a lot of the same things. Co-creator of Slice of Life, which is the WEBTOON portion of everything. We also do traditional comics. So I am also the creator of By Visibility, a superhero comic called Like Father, Like Daughter, and then also The Dancer. So we have our hands in a lot of pots, and WEBTOON is something that we've always loved for longer than we've been doing WEBTOON. It's always been our goal that we want to do something with WEBTOON and kind of marry traditional comics with digital comics. So we see such a plethora of people and a plethora of success through WEBTOON, and something that we have found and that we want to share the information with you. So of course, if you have any questions, you could add that to the chat too. We'll try answering them. We should also say we have many revenues streams that we use for WEBTOON. So we're going to go through all of them. And most importantly, it's Kickstarter as well. So we actually have a special guest, Oriana, who works for Kickstarter, and specifically the publishing and comic side of Kickstarter. So she is the head of the section for that, which is exactly the section you would have if you put your WEBTOON on Kickstarter. So that's going to be a big portion of this episode. But first, we're going to start talking about ad revenue that you could get directly through WEBTOON. Then we're going to talk about Patreon. We might touch on social media as well. And then again, the bigger section will be Kickstarter. So let's jump into WEBTOON ads. So this is probably the easier thing. This is, again, directly in WEBTOON. So Phil, why don't you start talking about WEBTOON ads?
Sure, great. So as most people know, you can monetize off of WEBTOON directly once you hit certain milestones. So as of right now, I believe it's 1,000 subscribers and 40,000 monthly views makes you eligible for both ad revenue and the WEBTOON Creator Rewards Program. Both are good ways to start earning a little bit of money back from posting on WEBTOON. So the Creator Rewards Program is a set amount of money that you would get paid every month for maintaining certain view milestones. So I believe
through
for
ads. So it's pretty much if they it's through ads too. So and I might be wrong, but at least how YouTube works is if you click an ad pretty much. So if someone clicks your ad,
yeah, there's two sides of it. So there's the Creator Rewards Program, which is a set amount, and then there's the ad revenue on top of that, which is based on clicks on ads, and you may have different number of views, but get the same ad revenue, or more views and less ad revenue. It all depends on the ad impressions. So, with the Creator Rewards Program, as long as you remain qualified, as long as you have that 40,000 monthly views, I believe the starting is $100 a month, and then that steadily increases as you hit other milestones, 200,000 monthly views. I forget what the higher ones are. And then, as Kat said, the ad impressions, the ad revenue is just based on how many impressions readers do on the ads at the bottom of your WEBTOON episodes, which unlock once you enter the ad revenue program. So,
and then also you have the unlocking of episodes as you get more viewership.
The reward ads.
And that's through ads as well.
Exactly. So that's the reward ads. That's the next level up. Once you hit, I believe you need 200,000 monthly views to apply for reward ads, which you've probably seen them on WEBTOON if you read a lot. You lock an episode for I think it's a week for 7 days behind a 30-second ad. And, that's another way to make ad money off of WEBTOON. We actually just entered that program recently. But we haven't actually tried an episode behind that yet. So that's something we're looking forward to doing in the next couple of months, I think.
And that's stuff that's directly through WEBTOON. So those, I think, are pretty easily accessible to people, also acceptable as well. So that's a pretty easy way to do it. But now we're kind of going to jump into the things that aren't as obvious on Webtoon, because that's kind of the stuff we wanted to focus on. Obviously, we wanted to give a precursor to the things that I think Webtoon obviously does a really good job of promoting. So let's talk about Patreon, because this is really big for a lot of people. We're obviously going to be tackling this through as a writer. I honestly think that for an artist, it's a little easier to grow a Patreon, but it's not impossible for a writer to grow a Patreon.
Yeah. I would say one of the great things about Patreon, two of the great things about Patreon is one, that they have a plugin directly through Webtoon. You can have readers go directly from your Webtoon page to your Patreon. And two, it's very accessible. Just as we said, there's some barriers to entry with the ad revenue program on Webtoon. Sometimes that takes creators a little bit of time to unlock those, but you can launch your Webtoon with the Patreon and control. You can kind of mimic the reward ad program. Obviously, you could have a tier where you give early access to your episodes, which is probably the most common reward you'll see on Patreon. And we should probably start by talking about what Patreon is. So basically, it's a subscription service effectively for you. You charge a monthly amount with different reward tiers, and your patrons will get access to different rewards based on the pledge level that they choose, and they get billed monthly for that. As I said, the most common that we usually see for Webtoons is early access to episodes, and that's usually the lowest tier we'll see. But then, there are other things that you can offer: exclusive content, exclusive art, extra chapters, and then especially, as Kat said, we are tackling this from a writer's perspective. But if you're an artist, you can offer live streams, you can offer work in progress, you can offer Q&As, requests, commissions, etc. So there's a lot of different ways you can monetize off of Patreon and make your offering very unique to your readers.
And something we didn't mention, we didn't talk about what our comic is, and this will go into what comics we've seen on Patreon and what we've seen is successful. So we have a romance comic. It's slice of life. It's about an anime character that comes to life and falls in love with a high school cheerleader. So for us, we're a GL. So we're part of the GL community a lot. And again, more part of the romance community. We also do drama, and then we also do, of course, slice of life. But the reason I mention that is that because I've seen a lot of artists, like if you're an artist, I see what's been successful is making sketches or content of your characters that maybe is not on your Webtoon. So something I've seen that's like successful is like seeing them be romantic. Maybe they're not in a couple yet. And then if you actually get to see them be a couple on the Patreon, that's something that viewers obviously want to see. And obviously, if you have, let's say, an action book, maybe people want to see some killer action. They want to see a type of action that they don't normally see in the comic. So giving content that is very exclusive to the Patreon, and always look at anything that you're doing as, what would you buy? What would you pay for? And you should enter that with anything that you're doing like Patreon, and we'll get into Kickstarter as well.
Yeah, and just to relate our example, as Kat said, we're a GL, a girl love comic, and as of right now, our lead couple hasn't officially gotten together yet. So one way that we kind of mobilize readers to Patreon is by I think it's quarterly, we'll post a bonus chapter that takes place in the future, so you can see them as a couple before it actually happens in the Webtoon itself. So as Kat said, depending on what your book is, pay attention to what your readers are responding to the most and offer that on Patreon. If you're building towards something and you want to make sure you set it up properly before you get to it on Webtoon, Patreon is a great place to maybe give a sneak peek, just to keep readers excited in the moment, and also a way to generate revenue for you on your Webtoon and get people onto your page.
Yeah, and I think something that we've seen really one thing I really love with Patreon is, we talked about the early access stuff, but having our patrons being able to talk and comment about this stuff earlier than you normally would. But I also seen this with like sketches of future covers we have, or just prints that we're doing, are really successful on Patreon, especially from a commenting point of view and likes. So that's a really great way. Another really, really good tip that really helped us build our Patreon was having a teaser of the Patreon episode that you are posting. So like the future episode that you're doing. So let's say you have chapter 5 up. Show the teaser for chapter 6 and say, hey, if you want to see this early, go to our Patreon, and having a little like line that says exactly what's going on in that episode, or like a kind of like a teaser line, like a headline, and then an image that's exciting from the chapter to try to persuade people to go to your Patreon, because you want to convince people to go there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a little bit of a fear as a creator of promoting yourself, which is strange. Like you're afraid that if you tack on like, oh, you can support us in other ways at the bottom of your episode, you might turn off readers. At least that was a feeling we had. But you know, it's so important to tell your readers how else they can support you. And one great way to do that while also staying on brand and staying relevant to what people are reading is with that preview of the next episode. We started doing that probably 20 or so chapters, 20 or so episodes into our webtoon, and we got 5 times the number of patrons that first time that we teased the next episode. So definitely don't be afraid to tell people what they're missing out on and what they should be checking out if they're already fans of your book, of your series.
And it reminds them that the Patreon exists. Like sometimes people forget. It's like if you're watching your favorite YouTuber, let's say, and they reference their merchandise in the middle of their episode and they mention it a couple of times. They'll mention it in that episode. And then like 3 episodes later, they'll mention it again. And you're like, man, maybe I should really get this merchandise. And it's the same thing for your webtoon. It's just like maybe the first time I'm like, yeah, the Patreon sounds cool. But the more time you see it, it's just kind of like this. We call it the
Coca-Cola effect,
where it's just like, right? We got to talk about the Coca-Cola effect, where you're walking Times Square, let's say, and you're always every day in your route, your way to work or your way to school, you're seeing the Coca-Cola sign, right? You're not in that moment thinking, I got to get a Coca-Cola. But as days go on, you're like, this Coca-Cola thing seems kind of big. And the next time you see Coca-Cola somewhere else, like you go to the pizza shop or whatever, and you see Coke, it's like, I've been hearing about this Coke a lot. Maybe I should get it. So it's just like this subconscious way of people to learn, like, oh, this Patreon kind of seems kind of big. I should probably do something about it. I should probably like check it out. So it just reminds people about it as well. It's in their subconscious. Even if they don't get it in that moment, they might get it a month later because you keep reminding them of it.
And you could switch up what you promote. Like we said, most often we'll promote that early access tier. We'll say that you will get early access to episodes and we'll tease the next episode. But you can also tease if you just dropped a new bonus chapter, something that won't be available free to read on Webtoon or anywhere else that you might post. That's a good way to get people over. Let them know that there's something that they'll never get to see unless they support your Patreon. Or if you're doing a fan art contest, or if you just launch a Discord and you have Discord benefits for your patrons, there's any number of ways you can mix up the messaging and just while pointing people towards your Patreon, because it might not be the first time, but the 5th time they hear about it, they might check it out.
And also be creative. I think that's something that me and Phil have found success, not just in Webtoon, but everything that we've done is that we've never felt stagnant. There's been like, you write Haunting or I write like Follow Like Daughter. It's not the only series we write or it's not the only thing we do because we don't want to ever be stagnant. We always want to come up with new ideas and new ways to promote things. Like today, we just like had an hour phone call, just like, how can we do things differently and how can we keep pushing ourselves to be successful? And I think sometimes you do have to stop. And especially if you have a partner, that's even great because you can like bounce back different ideas, but even to yourself, always give like maybe once a month, think about, well, how can I grow? I think you being in this workshop is already showing that you're doing the effort to find out how to grow. But yeah, always questioning how to be better and how to make your thing better. I think a great example of that was the Patreon thing. Like that idea of us doing a preview at the end did not happen in episode 1. We had to keep thinking, how do I grow this Patreon? How do we make money on this book? And I think I see a lot of times in comics in general or Webtoon where people will already give up because like, oh, it feels impossible to make money. I don't think you should ever go into this feeling that way. You should always think, okay, maybe it feels impossible now, but there's always a way. I just need to throw more darts at the board. Like I just need to continue doing it. And in probability shows if you continue to work and do different things and really try to succeed, you will succeed.
Yeah, and it's also just about being honest with yourself and figuring out what's working, what are people responding to, and what can I do differently. I think there's a temptation if things don't go the way that you expect them to right away to give up, but it's just a wake up call that take inventory of what's working and what's not, and see how you can change things to make things to your benefit. Kat and I have had a lot of honest conversations about mistakes that we've made, and it helps having someone else to bounce off of. And one of our upcoming workshops is actually about working as a team, if that's something you're interested in doing. But, not necessary. If you're a one person show, if you're a single-handed creator, then you should just be willing to have those tough conversations with yourself and take inventory of what you can change to improve your Webtoon and any other creative aspects of your life that you're working towards.
Or even get like better readers or like better people where you can ask them like, be honest, what can I do to work towards to be
Yeah, it's
even
always
better?
great to have another set of eyes to look at your work and from a critical lens, because
Mm.
one of the great things about Webtoon is that readers are very supportive. You always get a lot of uh, positivity in the comments, so it's helpful to ask someone to go in with a more critical lens and say, what did you take out of this, and make sure it aligns with what you want readers to take out of it, and also what you're trying to point people towards. Are they excited about a twist that you're building towards? Did it even register to them that you are plugging your merch at the bottom, or is your merch resonating with them, or is it even reflecting the things that are most popular about your particular series?
And that actually goes into merchandise for a second. And then honestly, I'm going to kind of, oh, we actually have a question. So I'm going to go with that for a second. But I do want to mention merchandise because I think that's something, if you do look at our pages, you'll see that we have, well, I should plug, we have an enamel pin campaign coming up for Slice of Life. And then we also have sold plush dolls for Slice of Life as well. And we have actually found success. And I would not always recommend to do merchandise because our other books we don't. But we have found success doing this because we were able to build an audience first. We did not do plush dolls right away. It was not an issue 1 where we did plush dolls. But we got a good amount of money for Slice of Life issue 1. We were able to make money through Patreon. We were never in the red when we were making these things. We always wanted to be in the green. We always wanted to see, okay, what profits can we make? We have a very tight budget, which I will say is very important for all this. If you're making, let's say, physical books or again, merchandise that you think could really sell, obviously invest. You should invest your money because you only succeed if you invest, but also know, can you make it up, and what profits would you make after that? So be smart with your money as well.
Yeah, set reasonable goals for yourself. If I can prove that there is an audience that wants a plush doll, then I will go out of my way to make a plush doll. But obviously, any merch that you create has the potential to make you money. It has the potential to lose a lot of money and just have a lot of inventory. So you just need to make sure you justify and you don't do too much at once. Start small and then build up. If that's stickers,
Yeah.
stickers are nice and
Mm.
easy and cheap, and that's something that you could sell on a Kickstarter or even on a Patreon. They could do physical merch on Patreon, or on an Etsy store. If you're into the convention scene, or you could sell them at conventions as well. And that's something else we can maybe talk about today.
We definitely should talk about conventions. Yeah, we started with stickers first, and we didn't even get that many. I think we got like 100, and we sold out really quickly. So especially through the Kickstarters. So we're like, oh man, we should get more. And same thing for the plush dolls. Ooh,
That was my
this
bad.
did the plush doll
Turns
fall?
out it was a load-bearing plush doll.
But yeah, no, with the plush doll, we got like at 250, and we've sold out. We're not sold out, but we're selling very quickly. So we're like, oh, okay, maybe next time we should get more. So we started out small with a lot of these things. And pins, we did not start with the Slice of Life pins. We did it with a property that had even more backers on Kickstarter. So you have to don't do everything at once. Sometimes I see like comics where you're like, they haven't even had a fan base yet, and they're like creating a sword or something, and they spent thousands of dollars. Like, don't do that because you haven't proved your fan base. But if you see you have a fan base for smaller things, then you can make bigger things. Now we do have this question. So Phil, do you want to read it?
Sure. So from Duchess Art, do you think it's better to wait for your comic to grow bigger? Excuse me, grow a bigger following before creating a Patreon? My answer would be no. I think, if as long as you have content for Patreon, which can be as simple as early access episodes, I think it's best to launch with a Patreon. Otherwise, Kat and I always say, are we leaving money on the table? If you wait 6 months to launch your Patreon, you could be missing out on, maybe even a couple $100 that you would have made monthly for people who just want to read a little bit ahead.
And we have another great question from Sarah. What's the difference between Kickstarter and Patreon? So the big difference is that Kickstarter, you are trying to fund something. So you're funding a specific project. And for us, it was the physical book of Slice of Life. And now it's the enamel pins. So you put in the budget for how much you need to print it or how much it took to do the art, or if you're not doing the art yourself. And then you make that goal, and I believe that Kickstarter is a place you can make a profit. There are some people that believe that it's just for funding and that's it. But I truly believe that you can make a budget where you can make even profit off of your Kickstarter. We make a lot of profit off of our Kickstarters. That's actually our main revenue is Kickstarter. So yeah, it's a one and done pretty much for Kickstarter.
Yeah, so very similar to Patreon in that there are tiers, quote unquote, where if you pledge this amount, you're getting this reward. Maybe you're getting a digital copy of the book, maybe you're getting a physical copy, a plush doll, etc. So just like Patreon, you can kind of have your supporters customize what they're asking for. But like Kat said, the Kickstarter is a one and done. Patreon's a subscription. It's charged month to month. Both are great ways to make money. Kickstarter tends to be a lot more money at once because they're purchasing a given product, versus Patreon, you're typically, from each patron, going to be looking at just a couple of dollars a month. But obviously that adds up if you can cultivate an audience.
The name changes, which I believe is actually a Comic Uno follower. How come this live stream wasn't on Patreon? Wouldn't it be better? We do live streams on Patreon, but actually, we were so lucky enough that Webtoon asked us to do this live stream for everybody who is on Webtoon Canvas to get information. So we wanted to put in a place that you do not have to pay to see this live stream.
We do quarterly live streams on Patreon. We're actually due one pretty soon to do a live Q&A. And one thing that we offer to the Patreon Q&As is that we're willing to give spoilers a little more than we might otherwise. If readers want to ask something about something that's coming up that we would normally be tight-lipped about, we are more willing to talk about that on Patreon. So that's just something a little bit different you can offer to make it more compelling to patrons.
Yeah, but live streams are great on Patreon for sure. Kiram is saying thank you to Webtoon. You give us little people so much hope. Yeah, thank you, Webtoon. We should also say that this is Webtoon Canvas that is giving us the platform. They are technically two different things. So I want to make sure that we mention this is Webtoon Canvas. But yeah, let's get into Kickstarter a little bit, because we are going to have our guest on in about 10 minutes, and she's going to go into more of the nitty gritty for Kickstarter. And we want to talk specifically how it's helped slice.
Before we jump into Kickstarter, sorry to cut you off. Do you want to say a few words about conventions?
Oh, yes. We definitely should talk about conventions, because we do a lot. Do you remember, because we're actually going to New York Comic Con this year, which is great. I actually work for Read Pop, so it's fun to like be on the other side and do the Artist Alley stuff. So we're doing New York Comic Con. We have Baltimore Comic Con coming up in Rhode Island. Those are the last ones for the year. But adding those all up, how many Comic Cons did we do this year?
We've done 16 conventions this year. So that's like, what, a third of the year we've spent our weekends at conventions. And it's been a lot of work for sure, but it's also been really rewarding. One amazing thing about being on Webtoon is that so many people have the opportunity to read your series without it being locked behind a paywall, that I'd say at least once a convention get recognized for Slice of Life. Someone will walk by and they'll be like, wait, I know that. I read that. So, conventions are a great way to connect with an audience and also to sell your book. If you have physical copies of your book, especially if you have multiple books, if you've been creating series for a while, you can appeal to different audiences, sell multiple books. It's another really great revenue stream that you can add. Obviously, you have to account for costs. You have to pay to table at most conventions, and if you have to travel. So just like with anything, you should do proper budgeting, but conventions are another very important revenue stream in our model that we use to make sure that every comic that we tackle is profitable.
And it gets more fans. One thing that we do is we have our business card, where someone's actually mentioning this right here. We have a QR code directly to the Webtoon so people can read it free, especially if they like the comic. They said, I'm super interested in conventions. I hope to do a QR code keychain, back having a QR code, front being the art. Actually, honestly, from a money perspective, I just have the regular keychain, because that's like a lot of money to make a keychain. You could just sell that as a keychain, have a QR code and like a business card. It's cheaper to do, and you can still get the QR code, and then the keychain, like, it's wonderful art that someone can have.
Yeah, they could buy a keychain with a QR code as well, but definitely recommend having that business card, or even just a printout that someone can take a picture of. I recommend the business card because it's something they could take home with them. If they buy something from you, they could take the business card, and if they were reading a comic and they see the business card, it's like, oh, I'll check it out on Webtoon now.
And you slip it in there, especially if you're selling a physical book, you slip it in their bag and they'll have it when they bought it.
One thing that I think it was kind of a fear that we had to dispel is that, are people going to want to pay money for a book they can read on Webtoon? And our finding has been, yes, very much so. If people, especially if you're a fan of something that you're reading for free, you are going to want to check out the comic. You're going to want to buy a physical version a lot of the time. And that's been very rewarding for us. It makes us feel dumb for having been worried about it at all in the first place. And
then also one thing we do is the exclusive story for the our printed version. Yeah. That way it makes it feel even more special.
Exactly. Yeah. So our first issue here, for example, like, we collect the first 4 chapters of the Webtoon, but then the last chapter in here is actually an exclusive that's not available. So we try to do that with every printed version, so that there's some incentive for a reader who maybe doesn't want to get a physical, maybe needs an extra nudge, I should say, to get a physical copy, something that they wouldn't otherwise be able to read for free.
For sure. Let's see. They said Kiyobi says, "Hey, you never know when the internet will go down. Have a print version definitely helps for sure. That's a
Oh,
whole
yeah.
nother reason
Oh,
to
yeah.
have it."
I read all of my comics when my internet goes down.
But let's go into Kickstarter. Again, we have about 5 minutes until Oriana comes in to talk more specifically. And I think we have some really good questions for her, more specifically about Webtoon and why we think you should do Kickstarter. I should also mention I work for Kickstarter, so I'm part of their advisory council. So I have a big soft spot for Kickstarter, but I truly believe is such a game changer for anyone with a small business. Like we said, we make a majority our money tenfold through Kickstarter, so we're definitely going to be pushing that a lot. And there's such a wonderful community to build even another audience because of their algorithm. But yeah, let's start talking about it. Our Kickstarters, how much have we made through Kickstarter total for not every project because that's a lot, but through Slice of Life in particular?
Through Slice of Life, I believe we're sitting around 50,000 right now, and we have 2 more campaigns launching. So we have the enamel pins launching next week, and then we have issue 3 launching in like a month or so. And so, we've been doing Slice of Life for a little over a year. I think our first Kickstarter was about a year ago. So, in just a year, we've made 50,000 just on the Kickstarter component without accounting for all those other revenue streams. So, as Kat said, it's definitely our biggest moneymaker when it comes to Slice of Life.
And that's why your budget's so important, because in that sounds like a lot of money, and it is, but you need to learn how to understand where you should put your money. Don't do extra costs just because you're like, oh, let's put $1,000 here, $1,000 here, because you see that you made all this money. You want to make a profit off of things too. So you want to kind of just build your budget really well.
Yeah. And
yeah.
We already talked about what Kickstarter is. It's a crowdfunding platform. You build different tiers that people can support at. Some other things about Kickstarter that maybe we haven't mentioned previously is that it really is a community. There is a whole community of comic creators, some from Webtoon and some who publish for their first time their comics on Kickstarter, who don't launch on other platforms. That's how Kat and I both started, actually. We would crowdfund our books on Kickstarter that were not available to read on Webtoon or another platform as a webcomic. So, you hit a different audience, but you also can be involved in a different community than the Webtoon community. It's great to be involved in a lot of different aspects because it exposes you to different ideas and also different creators who might inspire you and give you other ideas for things that you can offer.
And you should learn about Kickstarter. So it's just like if you learn about Webtoon, you're learning about this. If you are going to go into Kickstarter, don't just launch your project. You should learn how to build a Kickstarter page and how to connect with people in your community. You should support other Kickstarter campaigns and see what they're doing. So definitely do your research before you do a Kickstarter, because I'm not saying that you will make a Kickstarter and have one blurb and no images and you'll succeed. You do have to work at it.
So, Kat, before Oriana jumps on, what are some of your suggestions for Kickstarter rewards that people can offer that would set them apart and interest potential backers?
I would say that you're making a printed comic. Let's pretend that's what you're doing, because I see that's the only way that it could be successful on Kickstarter. I definitely think there's a way that you could just make the Webtoon and you can make a Kickstarter through that. But let's say you're doing a physical book. Obviously, the book itself, if you have other books, that's a really great way to just make money. And then stickers, I think, is a really cheap way to make money on Kickstarter. We love doing trading cards. That's one of our favorite things. It's pretty cheap to make, and people like it.
That cheap and fun, and it's something exciting for us. Packing is a big part of our day that we spend a lot of time shipping out rewards, and something that always excites us is randomly picking the trading cards people are going to get.
And speaking of, I think Oriana's in the background in our backstage, but did you have something you wanted to say?
Last thing I was going to say is variant covers. People love variant covers, and that's a Kickstarter is a good opportunity to sell a book with different covers and try out different art and different styles.
Awesome. So let's bring in our special guest, which is Oriana. How's it going?
Hey, Oriana.
Hello. I feel very special.
As you should be.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. We're so happy to have you. We were just talking about how to make money through your Webtoon through other means like Patreon and Comic Cons, but we want to talk to you about our favorite place, and honestly where we truly believe you can make the most money through Webtoon, which is Kickstarter. So why don't you introduce yourself, and we'll get into some questions. And of course, audience members, if you have questions, ask away as well.
Awesome. Hi, I'm Oriana. I'm the Director of Publishing and Comics Outreach at Kickstarter. That's it. I get to help people, everything from books to comics to journalism to podcasts to literary magazines, raise money to fund their dreams. It's a pretty fabulous job.
Awesome. Well, let's jump into these questions here. So first is, why is Kickstarter beneficial to Webtoon creators in particular?
Yeah, so I think that Webtoon creators are already extremely digital savvy, especially digital marketing savvy, which is sort of the critical predictor of success for crowdfunding. I mean, Kickstarter exists on the internet. Your outreach and promotional strategy is going to have a lot to do with how you can reach your audience. And I think that creators on Webtoons already really know that. Also, with Kickstarter, you can make a physical product. People are already enjoying your comics digitally. This gives you the opportunity to give them something to hold in their hand, to put on their shelves, to, give to their friends. So it seems like a really natural fit for me to use one to springboard into the other.
Absolutely. Awesome. And you can also sell digitally on Kickstarter, which is great. If you're obviously people are already reading your book physically, but we have a lot of people who actually want the sequential version of the webtoon. Usually you read the mobile scroll form, but who want the comic pages. So,
and I heard as I popped in, you guys were talking about some cool stuff you can do with rewards. You can use your characters to make all sorts of other cool things. You can bring your audience into the story if you want to. You can sell off naming rights for your characters. I've seen, nominate your mother-in-law to be drawn in as the villain. Various.
That's fun. That's actually something we've done, right, Kat? We've actually
we did cameos.
Yeah, we've done name cameos in our first chapter from another Kickstarter that you could have your name in our webtoon before it launched, and then
I believe my mom was the voice the villain in one of the episodes.
No, your mom voices Yuriko. Her mom she voices Yuriko. the lead of the series. And then we have actually drawn in cameos later on that we started to offer once the webtoon was already a success. So
and they actually were bigger characters too. They were like characters that talked. I remember there was one where it was just a character they were actually able, as a creator, it was another comic creator, and they had their superhero on the shirt of the character. And that was all they actually was wearing. Oh, and that was cool. So that was a way for them to even just promote their superhero. And then another character, we were trying to fit her in. We're like, oh man, there's no background characters we can have, but we have this teacher who has is a lead of this whole chapter. And we asked her do you want to be a speaking role? She has a kind of bigger role. And she's like, yeah, that'd be a lot of fun. So you never know what you could do with them.
Yeah. She was in 10 panels, probably, maybe I'm mistaken, but she was in a lot, so she lucked out. Maybe she'll
get a trading card. Who knows?
The Kickstarter mechanism really allows you to bring your supporters and your readers into your creative process more. Trading cards and enamel pins and all the other swag stuff is wonderful, but making people feel really connected to your creative work is kind of a unique thing that folks can do through our platform, because it gives you a direct line to the people who are your most fervent supporters.
Absolutely. And I feel with Webtoon, there's a lot of people that are artists. So let's say you can make commissions as well. The reason a lot of people are checking out your Webtoons is because they like the art style. They like the vibe of the book. So maybe somebody really wants a Christmas gift that is in the style of their favorite Webtoon. And that's a wonderful Christmas gift or wonderful birthday gift. So things that you don't think of that are who wants an art commission in that style? It's a lot of people do. You don't think about it, but a lot of people want that.
Totally.
Sometimes they don't know they want it until they see it on the Kickstarter.
For sure.
Yep.
Great. I think we can move to our next question for you, Oriana. How can you make a successful business model through Kickstarter?
Well, so, it's kind of an enormous question. I think the part of the question that I will address is, how do you figure out your funding goal? Because really that's, I suppose, if you view your campaign as a teeny tiny little business, the business of making this book, that's the sort of business model that you want to work from. And so this is the really unglamorous stuff of calling a bunch of printers, getting a prototype and going to the post office and finding how much it costs to ship to all the different places, figuring out all of your manufacturing and production costs for your rewards, factoring in your time. The Kickstarter mechanism only collects money once. So all of the costs associated with everything that you're promising through your campaign, from your book to your rewards to, all of the shipping costs, it all has to be factored into your main campaign goal. So Kickstarter takes 5% of all successful projects, and our payment processor, which is Stripe, they take like 3 to 4% variable based on where all the bank accounts are from which they're grabbing money to put into yours. So we tell people to budget 10% for fees, and you will make sure that that's covered. You won't have any surprises. Make sure you build in a buffer. Whatever you do, we are all hearing all the time about supply chain mishigas and paper shortages and shipping fees increasing. So make sure you've got some padding in any budget that you make, and also pad your time. As with anything, under promise, over deliver. I think that's the correct thing. But if you say it's going to be in people's hands in 6 months and it doesn't come in for 7, people are going to be angry at you. But if you say it's going to come in 6 and it comes in 4, you're a superhero. So absolutely build in extra time, way more than you think you will need. And so hopefully you can just surprise people by getting it in early.
And I think a question that kind of goes is kind of a follow-up question for this, is that a lot of times in comics, there's this mentality where it's just like, you can't make money in comics. Why do you believe with Kickstarter as a tool, you can make money in comics?
Because it allows you to gather the people who are the most interested in financially supporting the work that you're doing and give them a mechanism to easily support you. Kickstarter is designed for project-based fixed funding. So if you know how much it's going to cost you to make this project, including money for yourself, and you can raise that based on the audience and the following that you have, it's a pretty clear path from one to the next to make sure that you're making this money.
For sure. And I think there's this fable, I would say, that there's like this thing of with Kickstarter saying like, you can only make money to fund and that's it. And I love the wording you use. Like, you also put in your budget to make money for yourself because this is your job. It's not just to be like, you're doing this for free and you're paying everyone else. You should pay yourself too. And I think more people, more creators should have a mentality of that too. And I think that is the whole point of this panel, is that you don't have to do this for free. You can make money off of comics, and you can make money off of your webtoon. You can make money off of your stuff.
Yeah, so no, 100%. Paying yourself is a budget line. Always. It always should be, and you can decide what, how much you're able to pay yourself. Maybe, you pay yourself in treats. Maybe you pay yourself in percentages, like percentage of stretch goals, like anything like this, but absolutely factor in money for yourself. This is for sure your job.
So going into the next thing, which is what makes a Webtoon Kickstarter stand out in particular?
I think the same thing that makes any comics campaign stand out. You want to have really nice images. You want to have a really strong project image. That's kind of your first task. I think about, if somebody's looking at your campaign on their phone, they're going to see the title, subtitle, the project image, maybe the first sentence, depending on their font sizes. You need to be able to communicate everything that you're doing just with that, and communicate it in a way that draws people in and makes them want to keep reading and seeing the rest of it. We really strongly encourage one full bleed image for your project image. I know, especially in comics, there can be a tendency to have lots of panels or to make sure that there's lots of characters or put lots of text overlay, but really these images appear in many places at many sizes. And so if you clutter them up too much with small images and small type, they're going to be pretty difficult to read or parse. Again, you want the project image is it's the cover, it's the first thing that people are going to see. It has to be interesting, intriguing, compelling enough that they want to keep looking at more. Similar for the title and subtitle, make sure that you're giving all of the relevant information. People sometimes will sort of waste that real estate with either not fill it up or say things. They'll repeat, adjectives in both the title and the subtitle. Like, it's not a lot of words. So make sure that you're using them really well, that you're communicating, what kind of work that you're doing. If you have like a recognizable name or something like that, you want to put that, prominently as well. Going down the page, you want to have a nice balance of text and imagery. I don't think this is, I work with authors who are doing prose books also. So this is probably more of a, something I tell them, but like, you want to make sure that your page is not a wall of text. You want to make sure that there's lots of images to break it up. As comics creators, you don't have to give away all of your imagery, but you do need to share enough so that people get a sense of the tone and, your style and your themes, things like that. The Kickstarter project page also allows you to communicate more about you. There's like a little bit, it's kind of a cult of a personality here. You're not just getting a book to read, you're also supporting an individual creator. So it's really nice to talk about what brought you to this work, who your inspirations are. If you've got any collaborators, you can highlight their work. Talk about your budget, talk about your time frame, explain sort of like what your process is going to look like. All of these things are like interesting and exciting. And look, like, not every single person is going to read every single word all the way down to the bottom of the page. So keep the most important information up top, and then allow, the ones who really want to keep learning more and more about you as they make their way down the page.
Something I've definitely seen a lot of with Kickstarter, especially if you're in like issue 3 or 4, I'll see in the beginning where it's just like they'll talk about what's happening in the series. Like, I've read the series before, and I think don't do that. Like, I think you have to really always look at, okay, also new people are reading this too. So how can I give information about this comic to new readers and old readers and kind of like mesh that together as well? That's something I've definitely seen. We have a lot of questions here, so I'm gonna have Phil read some. First, there's a wonderful comment. So Phil, I'll do them through the screen and you could read them.
Sure. From a cracked teacup, we got, that is an incredible question. I was recently told you tried the comic thing, it's not working, but I was still in the prep stage. Great mentality. We're always in the prep stage. Kat and I are still in the prep stage. Just wait till you see what we got coming.
Sure. We have a lot. This is another question.
Great. Also from a cracked teacup, we have, they don't believe you can support yourself with comics. Do you think self-support is possible with a lot of hard work? Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what this whole panel is about. As Oriana said, it's important to know the value of your time, your effort, and your product, and make sure that you do pay yourself and support yourself. I think you have to be realistic. You can't expect maybe to come out of the gate swinging and being able to quit your day job and just make comics when you just launched your first episode and you have one subscriber being yourself.
And you're your only subscriber.
I think just set milestone goals for yourself. That was something Kat and I did from the outset. We said, this is where we want to be in 2 months. This is where we want to be in 6 months. This is where we want to be in a year. And just take inventory to see how you can get there and what additional steps you can make to get to that point where not only is your project self-sustaining, but you're self-sustaining. And a lot of the time that's going to need to be balancing multiple projects if you want to support yourself. Don't limit yourself to just one thing. You're more than one project, and you have a lot of great ideas.
Sure. This is from our good friend T. As partners, have you find that it's more beneficial plan to launch your Kickstarter for different projects at the same time? I'm actually going to have Oriana answer this first, and then we'll come from a creator perspective.
Okay, well, so I want to make sure I'm understanding your question. So you can't run more than one campaign at a time. In fact, you have to fulfill your campaign number 1 before our system will allow you to launch campaign number 2. If you're talking about, so that's the first thing. So you can't do them. And also that would be terrible because you'd just be splitting your audience and your marketing. And, you want to concentrate pretty fully on, this kind of fundraising works really well because it's a short, very intense burst of promotion. You can sustain that for 30 days about one project. You can't sustain that for 90 days about 3 projects, then you're just doing a whole different kind of fundraising. If what you're asking is more like, should you plan out, sort of templatize, this is how the project page is going to look with certain, sections and headers and stuff, regardless of which comic you're doing it for. I suppose that could work, but I think Kickstarter is a really iterative process. We see the success rate go up dramatically for repeat creators. So I feel like you will learn so much with each campaign that you're going to probably come to the next one wanting to do things, wanting to adapt based on all of that anyway. So I wouldn't spend time laying a whole lot of groundwork when like you might make totally different decisions the next time.
Yeah, I think like for our point of view, we're creators that have done Kickstarter a lot. I think for us, what we really try to do is that we always come up with different, like when we want to launch the next Kickstarter, how we're going to fulfill the current Kickstarter we have. So always having a plan of, because again, we've done more than one Kickstarter, figuring out, okay, this could be our Kickstarter in spring. This could be our Kickstarter for fall. That's something you could do to kind of plan ahead. Like if you want to kind of figure out your yearly plan.
Yeah. And then also just, being involved in the community. Kat and I, we collaborate on a lot of comics, but we also have our own individual series. Obviously, we would never launch two series at the same time if they were something we both worked on. But something we've done a few times is she'll launch one of her series that she's the entire creative force behind, and I will launch one of my series that I'm the entire force behind. And we'll try to see how can we cross promote. Is there something we could offer to people who support both series? And that doesn't just have to be with a business partner or a frequent collaborator. You can see, are there other people on Kickstarter who you're a fan of or who have a similar offering that you can find some sort of way to cross promote with, whether that's a digital offering, you give something bonus digitally, digital art, digital comic, or something physical like an art print or a trading card. So,
and you can also just, as I'm sure you guys know and do, you can just cross promote via backer updates, via tweets, via any other sort of just like rising tide lifting all boats. So sharing your audiences, sharing, each other's work can be really effective.
Absolutely. And update swaps is probably the easiest and I would say one of the most effective ways of getting audiences together. Because again, it's so easy. It's just like, let me talk about this project in my update. I already have to do an update anyways. Why not share the love with somebody else?
And you're talking to people who have already decided to support at Kickstarter. So they're pretty primed to go ahead and keep supporting another.
Totally agree. And we have a couple more questions here. So Lydia Jane says, what if you have a low following? Would Kickstarter still be a good idea? If not, in what point should I consider Kickstarter? So Oriana, why don't you go first? And again, we'll go from a different perspective.
Yeah, totally. And this was, one of the questions that you two had previously sent me that we didn't get to is what's the biggest mistake you see from first-time creators? So the answer is actually the same. In order to set yourself up for success with Kickstarter, you need to try to make sure that your ambition matches your reach. So another way to say that is all of that work I talked about, the budgeting, the print costs, like all these things, you need to figure out what it will truly take for you to get, to fund this project. And then what is your reach? What does your audience look like? What's your, platform in various parlance? You want to take a real honest look, not just at who's your social media followers, but who can you reach via email? What press might be available to you? What sort of signal boosters or amplifiers might you find in the community? I think social is really important. Of course, we're all on social media all the time, but the highest conversion rate for Kickstarter backings is individual emails. I think of social as just the sort of like keeping your name in the ether and like in people's ears. So you're gonna do it a lot, but you're gonna see more direct backings from other methods, from like email and press and things like that. So building your community is knowing who is in your crowd and how you're going to reach them. That's the strongest predictor of success. So there's not it you just need to find a balance between those two. If you want to fund a small project and you have a small following and they're commensurate, you could be fine. But if you're an emerging artist and you have, you don't have a mailing list, you've only got a small sort of audience, don't come to Kickstarter trying to raise, 5 figures, because that's probably not going to happen for you.
Yeah, I think building your mailing list is really important. Going to conventions, like we mentioned, is really important to build things like that. Also, what we mentioned before, like you're a Webtoon creator, supposedly because you're on this workshop, make friends with other people that are in Webtoon. Like be part of the community, because that is a following, is when you're part of the community, and vice versa for Kickstarter. Especially if you want to launch on Kickstarter, become friendly with other Kickstarter creators. We're all very friendly people. We truly are. Everyone in the comic book community and in Kickstarter is just such a pleasure. And we're so all willing to answer questions, willing to make new friends on the platform. So just be a part of the community, and that's a way to build your following as well.
Yeah, and one thing I'll add to that, in as much as this is a workshop about posting on WEBTOON Canvas, you should put your comic out there in every place that you can. You should experiment with posting on Tumblr or Tapas or any social media platform you can think of, TikTok, Instagram, etc. Because one thing that's great about Kickstarter is that you can actually collect information about where people found you from. When you send your survey at the end of your campaign to get fulfillment information, one thing we always ask is, optionally, tell us where you found us and what made you back this campaign. And
It's helped
one
us
thing
so
that's
much.
always, what was that?
It's helped us so much to kind of figure that out.
And
Yeah.
it's so humbling seeing the different places. We'll see people who came from the WEBTOON who found us on Tapas, where we also post the same episodes. There are people we met at conventions. There are people who found us through Kickstarter. Kickstarter very much has its own community of people who support comics and who specifically are looking for independent comics and who found Slice of Life and became fans of the WEBTOON through Kickstarter. So there's just an infinite number of places that you can build your support base. I would say don't limit yourself, but also be honest with yourself before you launch a Kickstarter. Make sure that you have that support base to sustain it. And Kickstarter is great for helping you grow it, but you need a starting point to bounce from.
A big reason Slice of Life was successful was we were very lucky enough on the WEBTOON platform that we actually when we launched, we got a good amount of followers. I remember when we were just starting, we are like, yeah, it'd be nice in like 6 months to get 1,000 followers, wherever we're thinking. I think we got 1,000 followers in like 1 week. It was crazy.
We had a skewed barometer for starting out, but in as much as it was partially luck, partially the algorithm helping us out. We also
and partially just research about WEBTOON. Like we also just did so much research about the platform.
Came off the heels. I'm sorry to cut you off. We came off the heels of another project we did, By Visibility, our bisexual anthology. So we already had 1,300 people who supported that Kickstarter who we knew were interested in queer comics that we immediately promoted Slice of Life to. So, it's also about taking inventory of the reach you already have. If you've done another project, plug your new project with it. Those are all potential.
Especially if it's similar.
Absolutely, yeah. And, find those similarities if they're not as apparent. Find a way to, if somebody likes something you worked on previously, more often than not, they'll be willing to check out the next thing you do.
It's interesting, when we launched By Visibility, it still is our most successful campaign. We had like over 1,300 backers. But when we launched it, we did launch Slice of Life. That was our next project right after. And I remember Russell Nolte, who does a lot on Kickstarter, he's a bigger name on Kickstarter. He messaged like in our tweets that that's one of the most brilliant things you ever did. It's like you just had such a big queer anthology, which is like so big for Kickstarter, and then you did this queer WEBTOON that is so similar to it, and it's like your series, and it's just like you're so smart to do that back to back. So being smart of which projects you're doing as well and what your audience is, I think really is helpful. But yeah, let's get into the next question. Actually, we had a question that we prepared, and then we'll get more to the viewers' questions. So we're getting to the hour mark. So if you guys have any more questions, let us know. It could be towards the end questions, because this is our last question, Oriana. And then we can get to these viewers' questions, and then we can start wrapping up. So I think, Phil, do you want to ask the question?
Sure. So last question. What are the biggest WEBTOON/Kickstarter success stories you can think of?
Well, you will probably be happy to know that Slice of Life is both number 2 and 3 in most backed WEBTOON campaigns that I could find in a quick search this afternoon.
I like it. Thank you.
There's also one that's live right now. Thomas Zahler's that's the wrong thing, Cupid's Arrows, which I believe that he's doing with Rocket Ship. So a couple of others that I've noticed recently, Ghost Maya's done Oh My Ghost a couple of times. Obi Ood has Red Origins, the Afro anime WEBTOON, and then Haze Shift I thought was really cool, just like really beautiful art. So those are some that I've seen lately that I thought were neat.
Awesome, thank you. And I love that Slice of Life is part of that list. That's always humbling.
Very humbling.
So let's get into some of these viewers' questions here. So we have Jose who says, this may sound like a question for the team building webinar. So we also have another webinar that's coming up that we'll promote in a bit. But what are some best practices to split the profits equally among the team members and any way to make doing so less difficult? So I'm going to reframe the question for Oriana, and then we'll do that question as a Webtoon people. So Oriana, for you, how do you feel? What's the best mentality of budgeting for your team, you feel, from a Kickstarter point of view?
Golly.
Right? It's a bigger question.
I don't suppose that that's something that I have really given advice on before. That's sort of a, case by case, I think, depending on your team and your roles and, et cetera. I will say that, Iron Circus, one of the early big adopters of Kickstarter, sort of pioneered, in comics specifically, pioneered the idea of using stretch goals to give raises to contributors, which I still think is really, really, really lovely. And that also encourages all of your contributors to keep promoting the campaign themselves, because there's now everybody's got skin in the game. So yeah, I don't know. Creative teams can look so different. I'm not sure that I have any sort of top level advice about how to do a fair and equitable distribution of funds. Sorry.
From our side, I think from a comic side, we come from the writer's perspective. I know from Webtoon, I've seen people do very 50-50. So especially for people that might not have as much money up front, they'll go with the artist and be like, hey, I don't have the money up front, but would you like to work with me? And we both literally make the same profits. We'll make the profits off the same thing, and we'll get payment that way. We do it in a more traditional sense where we pay page rates. So we'll pay, the page rate of the artist. Will ask, what's your page rates? And we'll be like, okay, and we'll pay them. And that's kind of how we do it. Phil, do you have anything else to add on that one? And also one thing we definitely do is that we try, as the more money we make, we try to raise more money for the people that work for us as well.
Absolutely. And yeah, I think the key to any sort of partnership is just transparency from the beginning. Whatever arrangement you agree to, as long as all parties are happy and continuously remain happy, could work.
Maybe write up a contract too.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be fancy legalese, just something outlining the terms. Because, when you launch a Webtoon, there's no guarantee that you'll see a return on your investment. Some artists, if you're a writer teaming up with an artist, or if you're two writers teaming up with an artist, like in our case, some artists might be willing to bear that risk that they won't see a return on their investment, while others might be more interested in, I want this guaranteed page rate, and then it's more of a work for hire model where they get their page rate, and then if the project is successful, we will get the money, and then we will distribute. As we said, we try to share the love whenever we have profit to our team, and then it's just making sure that the team remains happy with that arrangement as you go on, and is communicative with one another. Kat and I have had a lot of difficult conversations to make sure that, both of us are pulling the same amount of weight to justify that, we do everything down the middle. That's the way that we've always approached all of our projects. So we want to make sure that we're also pulling our own weight and doing an equal amount of work.
We always check in. Honestly, we have those type of conversations maybe once a month, honestly. And if there's from something that, and we'll talk more about this in the team building workshop, but something that we really do is just if something bothers us, we actually say it. I think if you're working as a team, you definitely should say because it's just the little thing that bothers you becomes a big thing, and that could become a thing that really just, could destroy a partnership. So if you're working with an artist or working with a co-writer, I think a big thing is just, like you said, communication's key. If something's bothering you, say it. Don't be a yes man. Say when something's bothering you. And I think that's why me and Phil's work dynamic works so well, is because if something we feel is unfair, or something bothered us, or something's going well, also not be a negative Nancy. If something's really positive happening, share that with your fellow creator and be like, you did that really well. It was so awesome that you did that. We did this really well. We're being, back and forth. You got to be positive, but you also have to be critical. We do have another question here. Do you happen to have an example anywhere that is a good example for, all right, let me see if I can read this. For example. Okay, so goals for your Webtoon. No, because I feel
Sorry.
No, you go.
I was going to say, like we said before, we had a pretty skewed barometer when we launched. We wanted 1,000 subscribers at the 3-month mark, I think it was, and we got that in 1 week, which obviously we're very fortunate to have done that. But I think the key is to set goals based on your performance. So, you can launch with a goal in mind, whatever that is for you. If you've launched previous comics, whether those are webtoons or not, if you have an established audience, I think you could maybe set a little bit of a higher goal for yourself. But otherwise, be realistic. Say, I want to hit 20 followers, with between my first 2 episodes, and then see how you're growing episode to episode, and set the goals that make sense for you, and ask the questions: what are other people doing to ensure that they continue to grow, and make sure you do the same thing. And again, like I said before, don't limit yourself to one platform. Definitely try reaching audiences elsewhere. There's people don't just read comics on Webtoon, they also will read webcomics in other platforms. So you should try to cultivate audiences in multiple different places.
Which is actually why we went to Webtoon too, because we again started in traditional comics and realized that Kickstarter in particular, I feel like there's such a bridge that you can make where I would want people that enjoy Webtoons to go to Kickstarter, and people that enjoy Kickstarter to go to Webtoon. And then even in the traditional market, I think there's still ways for the direct market to go to Webtoon. And I mean, we see it with the Batman Webtoon. Like, they go to Webtoon, and then maybe those people that read the Batman Webtoon love Red Hood, and maybe they picked up a Red Hood book because of it. So I truly believe there's a bridge. And again, we'll talk more about that in our future webinars. But I think that's all the questions. So we'll start wrapping up, see if there's anything to plug. So Oriana, do you have anything you'd like to plug before we leave?
I always say, if you are thinking about doing a Kickstarter campaign, find 5 campaigns you think are even somewhat similar to yours, back them for $1 or $2, and then find and follow those creators out in the world. Watch what everybody is doing and steal all the best tricks. We also have a publishing specific Twitter feed at Kickstarter Reads. It's Kickstarter READ because we ran out of characters. We promote projects and share press and stuff like that there all the time. We'd love for you to give us a follow. I am on Twitter and Instagram at Oriana, ORIANA BKLYN for Brooklyn. That's my stuff.
Awesome. I do see one more question before me and Phil plug our stuff, but what do you think about submitting to contests for the money? I don't think you should think about it as the money, because there's such a limited, I think you should enter, but always enter in a way of, I want to put my biggest product, to put a product out there, and maybe even create a new product because of it, and find new followers. But I wouldn't think about it for the money, because it's just such a small percentage that you might make it.
And on that same vein, Kat and I run a lot of anthologies, and we've submitted to anthologies before, comic anthologies, collections of shorter stories. So if you're submitting to contests, maybe also see if you could find an anthology to submit to. It's a great way to get your work in front of a lot of different readers, and also to just be among a lot of other creators.
And maybe get paid there too. There's a lot of people. For us, we do page rates for writers as well. So if we accept your submission, you get paid for that. So so those are good opportunities to get money as well. But Phil, where can everyone follow you, find you, and if you want to promote some Slice Life stuff?
You could find me on Instagram and Twitter at Phil Falco Writes. And then you could find Slice of Life. There's a link to the webtoon in this chat somewhere. Kat has sent it probably 200 times.
I'll send it. I'll send it again though.
Yeah, and again, just to give you the pitch again, it's about an anime character, Lady Vengeance. Not her, the other one. Lady Vengeance. Who has to learn to live in the real world, falls in love with a cheerleader. We have the book on Webtoon. We have a Patreon where you can get early access and some bonus chapters. We also have all of this cool physical stuff, books, plushes, and we have an enamel pin Kickstarter launching next Monday. So definitely check that out.
Yes. And follow all the Slice of Life stuff. The biggest thing that we're doing is the Kickstarter for the pins. We're super excited about it. We think they're really cute. It's just another layer of quality stuff that we want to bring to Slice of Life. We want to truly bring a world for Slice of Life to you. And you can follow me at Comic Uno. That's the best place. And also, you're on my YouTube channel, so why not give us a subscription and a like to support the YouTube channel? Because I do comic reviews every week. So if you enjoy comics, this is a great channel to follow, especially weekly comics. But hopefully you guys enjoyed. Again, Oriana, thank you so much for coming on and giving all your resources. You are wonderful. We love you. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you always for having me. You guys are terrific, and I love supporting all of your work.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us and being a wonderful crowd. We do have another workshop at this time, I'm going to actually screen share it. You're going to see my desktop for a second. I should have been more organized with that. But here it is. This is From Traditional Comics to Web Comics, and that's going to be next Monday at 9 o'clock. So we're super excited to talk about that as well. And you saw one of our main leads there, Yuriko, as the thumbnail. We thank WEBTOON Canvas for making these wonderful thumbnails. And also thank you for WEBTOON Canvas for giving us this space to talk about what a wonderful platform you are and the opportunities that you give to help fellow creators make money off their comics and build an audience with their comic book. So thank you very much for that as well. Absolutely. All right, guys, and we'll see you on Monday for another workshop. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye.